Okay, so we've just seen Thor Ragnarok, and I tell you right now, I want Jeff Goldblum as the next Avenger. I want him leading every Avenger film.
Marvel, just clear your slate, and I just want Jeff Goldblum in every single movie.
We just want Grandmaster films.
Just him. Just him. So we've just seen Thor Ragnarok, which is the third Thor film. This one picks up right after the last Avengers film, Age of Ultron, which came out back in 2015. A bit of time has kind of passed. Thor has been chasing down the remaining Infinity Stones, which if you know about, you know about, and if you don't, you don't. But that aside, we have a new big bad in Hela, played by Cate Blanchett, who has come to Asgard to rule over it. And Thor basically is kind of caught off guard in Asgard and finds himself on a very, very strange foreign planet trying to fight for survival and to get back home to stop this villain from doing her thing. You might have noticed that I struggled to kind of piece together how this film works, because this is a very, very crazy film for Marvel, I guess.
Yeah, it's a bit out there, it's a bit crazy, and I think that's why we start with the director. Now, this film has been directed by Taika Waititi, who most recently did Hunt for the Wilderpeople, and before that he did What We Do in the Shadows. He's a New Zealand director, and he's very well acclaimed. And he has gathered an almighty cast. It is actually quite astounding. I mean, of course, we have Chris Hemsworth returning along with Anthony Hopkins and Tom Hiddleston, but as you said, we also have Cate Blanchett here. We've also got Tessa Thompson, Carl Urban, Idris Elba returns as well.
Jeff Goldblum,
the man.
The man who we'll get to later on, because he's a highlight here.
As well as the director Taika Waititi, who also pops up in this film as a character, Korg, and he is fantastic.
He is amazing.
Plus we get a whole ton of cameos along the way.
There's a lot of exciting cameos in this one.
There is some very particular cameos we will not dive into, and if you haven't had them spoiled, that's fantastic, because it is flat out hilarious.
And now I think going into this movie, we were very, very excited over the trailers that we saw. This was a really over-the-top, kind of bold-looking film for Marvel to be doing. Yes, it had all their kind of signature trademarks with the comedy and that type of action, that visual style, but it really did seem like this was a really, really new direction. And while personally I still feel like the movie, I guess, didn't exactly meet that level of craziness I was hoping it would, this is still a damn entertaining movie that kind of has a couple of issues underneath that are problematic. But as a piece of raw entertainment, which is really all Marvel really is focusing on at this stage, you get just that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're going to walk out of this film, and whether you've got problems or not, you're going to have a really, really enjoyable time.
I'd see it again, and I've got problems with it.
Without a doubt, because, I mean, I think it starts with the director being a comedic director, and he nails his comedic moments here. It is flat out hilarious. For me, it is the funniest MCU film they've ever done. I was, you know, in fits of laughter throughout, and I know on a return visit, I will be again, because he's made for such incredibly memorable moments through his characters and just created for some just absolutely bizarre scenes.
This is the first time in a Marvel film I've actually been crying, I've been laughing that hard. Like, there's one scene in this that is so hilarious that I could not handle it. And I've got to say, I think a big part of why the comedy in this film works so well is the fact that Taika Waititi is from New Zealand, and Australians and New Zealanders have this really, really self-depreciating humour where we don't have any boundaries on what's going to be funny. We're happy to take the piss out of literally anything, and he does it here, and he's not afraid to go, I'm just going to go for broke in this moment and make it funny. And what I do have to say is something that's kind of been a big talk with Marvel lately is the way some of Marvel's movies undercut these big dramatic moments with humor. A big dramatic moment is building up and the moment doesn't stay sincere because a joke is put underneath, and quite often it ruins the drama. I do have to say that this film does do that, but this is the best I've kind of felt it kind of works. I don't think that any kind of comedy ever undercut a moment. I feel like you got two separate moments every time. This big thing would happen and you'd get that full emotional peaking and then the joke would come in. So I think he did a really good job of being able to balance that type of thing here, and I'm really impressed. I'd like to see this going forward in their movies more often so that I'm not constantly being pulled all over the place by tone.
And I think what would be really exciting about seeing him return as well is the fact that Taika Waititi really just takes the mickey out of the MCU here and the characters that exist in it, plus the new characters. So it'd be really cool to see him kind of return in a few years' time and like with all the new movies that we get and see him kind of like take the piss out of all the really serious stuff.
He deconstructs them and kind of spins jokes against kind of what we've come to understand, much I guess in the same way that Guardians of the Galaxy did, but I think there was comparisons with this going to be like Guardians where it really does not feel like Guardians at all. This is something completely different.
Plus also, if he did do that as well, it would allow for them to do more serious and dramatic films, and then for him to even come along and do like a really comedic film that would kind of balance that out.
If we're continuing rolling with what's really good about this movie, is I have to say, the costumes the set design, and I guess the overall design of this movie is fantastic. It really is abstract, it's colourful, it's got this 80s vibe. There's certain scenes when we strip back the VFX, which I will get onto later on, but when we just strip onto real sets, on the street, with the actors, and quite often you feel like it was improvised dialogue based on the way the actors are almost kind of laughing at each other, but yet it still feels completely real. Those scenes where the film is at its peak, where it's just authentic, kind of almost got that 80s sci-fi type vibe where everything's authentic, everything's real, and it just, you're in a different world, and Marvel doesn't do that very often, so it was great to see it happen here.
And moving right along to performances, let's just go straight ahead, because Jeff Goldblum,
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum finally gets to be full Jeff Goldblum.
In the best way possible.
It is just everything you could imagine for and more. It is just... What's going on?
He really does channel everything we've come to know about Jeff Goldblum. I don't even know if he's really playing a character or he's just morphed into another realm of being where he's just this... It's just a meme, I guess.
And in many other films, you know, it would be incredibly cringy, but the thing is here, like, the tone and the feeling and the style of the film allows him to just be super wacky.
He's so awkward and ridiculous, and the amount of jokes that are told just by, like, a character's talking, then we cut back to him and he's doing something that's just completely batshit insane.
Oh, further on from that, the next funniest character here is Taika Waititi's character of Korg, and Korg does actually have like a reasonably decent supporting role here, and he is fantastic. I mean,
he was responsible for the scene I was crying of laughter. I think just the fact that the director is able to go New Zealand accent is just people just find it funny. And he's able to say, hey, you know what? I'm up for being the butt of that joke. And literally, you see this character, as soon as they talk, it's hilarious, and it does not stop being funny at any point.
As for the rest of the actors, they all do really, really fantastic with, I mean, like, the comedic timing.
Things, not just the comedy, but some of the drama as well is done really,
for sure,
really well.
Especially in particular Mark Ruffalo here. He probably has one of the trickiest characters to kind of deal with, obviously with the Hulk and Bruce Banner, but in regards to also, like, he having to deal with, like, the comedy elements here as well as the dramatic elements, because he does have to ground a lot of his scenes and be serious, but also kind of still have this comedic flavour.
Chris Hemsworth at this stage just is Thor, same as Tom Hiddleston as Loki. They just kind of sink into the characters and they have a fantastic kind of back and forth between them. They flow really, really well. I also want to give a shout out here to Tessa Thompson. She really is fantastic here. She's a great new character I want to see more of.
Quite possibly the best new character of the MCU as far as I'm concerned, just because of her acting quality as well.
Yes.
And there's a lot that they can really get out of her, and she plays an absolute badass here.
A lot of times dedicated to her character here, which I appreciated because I really got kind of enough of her story to be wrapped up in what she is going through as a character.
And then we have Cate Blanchett as Hela, and there's been, you know, a lot of talk about her because the Marvel villains aren't often very memorable at all, but her performance here is very good. I enjoyed it, and you can see she had a lot of fun with it. However,
she goes for the wackiness, and that's cool, and it works. But we do have another Marvel villain who's like,
there was so much wasted potential as well. It is a character that
she keeps spouting all this rich history, all this stuff going on, and it's never really used. I'm never really brought into seeing her have an arc. She doesn't change at all. The best villains, right? Aside from you get those couple of psychotic maniacs that have to stay on that same wavelength the entire time, and they work really well because of that, you have to see a villain progress in some way, shape or form. That is why Loki has worked. That is why Adrian Toomes worked so well in Spider-Man Homecoming. You have to see a villain that intertwines and progresses in an effective way, and she fails to do that because of the way she is written. And now I think we can continue rolling into the problems that this film has, because it does have them, and you cannot, I guess, deny that. No matter how much you're entertained, this movie does have kind of issues. I think the editing here, the film is kind of over-edited, particularly at the start. I found the first act of this film to be really choppy, with scenes kind of happening for convenience or for no real reason. I end up being like, why are we here? Why does this need to happen? Why did that happen? How did it get us here? It's not that it didn't make sense, but it was just a very, very bizarre, contrived way of plotting things along the way, which didn't really sit right with me, considering so much of the film is just scenes and like sequences that flow so well together and have a fantastic organic flow. There was things where like, okay, we're cutting back to Asgard with Hela, and then we're going and doing this here, and that's not really working the way it should as a whole if the movie was written better. What I found is that it struggles to define some of its beats. Now, I'm not going to get into any spoilers here, but there's certain things that happen where it just feels like it's blended into part of the sequence, where it's a big moment that needs to have attention drawn to it. And it's like, oh, that happened. Oh, and now that's a thing. Where it needs to be, you need to define these moments so they have sharp impact. It's not that a single beat here is missed, just none of them have that a good film would have.
Other directors in the past, like James Gunn, for instance, you know, would really hone in on a scene or a moment like that, you know, whether it be with slow motion or whether he just takes his time with it. But here, they're just brushed over. And I think the annoying thing about it when we walked out, it's like these moments are not just moments, not just monumental for the film, but also for the MCU moving forward as well. So it's kind of like, you can't just brush over those and think the audience is going to be okay with that.
They kind of just happen, and they need to have attention drawn to them because they're a big deal. And if I roll into the next thing here, this is always a tricky thing to talk about because it's such kind of a divisive topic to cover, and a lot of people, there's a lot of lack of understanding of how this all kind of works from people all over online. But what I want to say is that the effects here range from incredible to how did they let that happen. There's some green screen work here in real locations where you're putting an actor in a location that's real, not some fictional made up set where they have to VFX it because it's impossible to do otherwise, and it does not look up to standard. I've seen student films that do green screen better than that, and I struggle to understand how they let certain stuff through.
Plus, your attention will only ever be drawn to bad VFX in a film when it moves away from the tone and consistency it sets with its VFX. And this film starts off with kind of this 80s flavor with its VFX. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. You know, this is a bit abstract, but hopefully it continues with it. But it doesn't, and the VFX kind of change from scene to scene and area to area.
And if we look at some of the combat stuff here, a lot of the fighting, there's times where certain characters are just completely CG'd, and it just not only is the action, as we've already said, not that great. When you're watching CG characters do it, you also lose the kind of amazingness of seeing stunt people kind of actually work their bodies into being able to do this kind of thing. You're just watching, you're like, everything I'm seeing is CG right now. And it does make me feel hypocritical because of stuff I've said about other films in the past, but I do have to draw attention to this one here, is that there's just stuff here that was not up to scratch. It's a shame because some of it was so brilliant, but as I've said, this film is at its best when the practical effects, when the costumes, the actual real sets are all there. That is when it's looking its best. When it is at the polar opposite is when it struggles. So if you haven't already rage quit this video and you're still with us, we would still want to stress that this movie is really entertaining and I can recommend it to anyone easily. I think you'd have to really kind of be going in wanting to hate it to not have some form of good time and get your money's worth with this movie. That being said, it does have problems that I can't not bring up, I can't blindly avoid because they are there no matter what. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I really enjoyed this film, and I think when I go to score it, I kind of enjoyed the entertainment value of it more. I'm just kind of sitting at somewhere between analysis, critical analysis, and entertainment value.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, this film is just super simply entertaining, and it is such a good time at the cinemas, and there's another easygoing, enjoyable MCU film in its catalogue. And, you know, whatever, like, I really enjoyed it, I had a good time, and it was flat out hilarious. I would highly recommend it to pretty much everyone. And so on that, I'm going to drop a big old 6.9 on this one. Highly recommend it. Go check it out.
And I'm giving this one a 6.5. I did enjoy it. I will see it a second time. Just, there's problems there. So that was our review of Thor Ragnarok. Have you seen it yet?
Did you like it?
Did you hate it?
Did you like this video?
Of course you
Pray
did.
for more banter.
If so, subscribe to our YouTube channel down there somewhere.
And don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter, all at Breaking Banter.
And you can also check out our Patreon because we have one of those now. Yeah.